welcome to today's webinar. We have a topic today we haven't gotten to cover in a while. I don't think we've done this on Zoom before. So we're talking about Japanese maples today. We have Michael Fahey with us, who works primarily at our Fair Oaks store. Michael, I'll let you maybe go into a little more detail about exactly what you do. Few quick notes before I hand it over to Michael to get started. For anybody who is new to this online class format, just I've got a few notes for you. As always, if you've attended previously, just bear with me for the next minute. This is a Zoom webinar. It's a little bit different than a Zoom meeting, so we can't actually see you or hear you during this class. If you have questions, you'll open up the Q&A box, type your questions in. I'll be watching those, and I think Michael will be as well. We'll kind of see if he's able to see those during the class, because his computer screen's a little far from him, but we'll both be watching that. And if you have any other issues, please feel free to send me a chat. I'll monitor those during the call as well. We are recording today, so a recording will be available following the class. They generally take about 24 hours to get ready, so we'll send that out by email. I think that is about it. So Michael, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it over. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sally, and everybody else who's here. I'm super excited to talk to you guys today. It's been a little while since I've done one of these, so bear with me. And Sally, challenge accepted. My eyesight is typically pretty horrendous, but I think I'll pop the Q&A box up, and if anything relevant pops up that I see, I'll try to address it. I always really like to encourage contribution from people during my seminars, webinars. You know, I always say if one person is thinking of something, then there's probably a handful of others who are thinking the same thing, and a lot of times time will pass and that thought is come and gone and I haven't addressed it, and a lot of times it's very relevant. So as long as everybody can keep their personal questions to the end, I'm happy to address anything relevant. So Sally, similarly, if you see something pop up and I can't quite catch it in the Q&A box, please stop me, and I'm happy to address it if it's relevant.
Will do.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, folks, for being here. Like Sally said, I primarily work out of our Fair Oaks location here at Merrifield Garden Center. I've been here going on 16 years. I'm a certified arborist. I've, seen a lot in the way of trees. I've studied under some really impressive minds. And conveniently for this topic, I am quite a Japanese maple geek. So I was thrilled when Sally approached me and asked me if I'd be happy to speak with you all about Japanese maples today. So one of the things that I always say is there is a Japanese maple for everyone and for every scenario. And I have a very good customer who I kind of endearingly term his property our Japanese maple edom. It's an arboretum of just Japanese maple varieties, but we've used them in such a way that they fit in as normal landscaping plants would to his entire property. So you could walk up to his property, it's just a normal looking landscape. You'd have no idea until you get up there and really scrutinize each plant that all of them are actually different types of Japanese maples. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so Japanese maples. So the first thing I want to address is the different types of Japanese maples. And again, I'm going to try and narrow it down here for you all today. I don't want to, get into too much of the nitty gritty, but there are a handful of different categories of Japanese maples. So when we're referring to Japanese maples, a lot of people come in with the center column on the screen, the Japanese maples, the Acer Palmatums. If you notice, I've separated those out. The right column there is Crimson Queen, Orangiola, Red Dragon, Tsumukiyama, Varieties. A lot of people come in when they ask for a Japanese maple. Those are the particular types they're thinking of. They're thinking of the weeping lace leaf Japanese maples. You see a lot of those planted as standalone specimen trees in front yards, and it's a fantastic plant, very common in this area. They do extremely well here. And a lot of times I don't think people really know that there are all of these other types of Japanese maples, and within these categories even, so it's not just all Japanese maples are in the same grouping. They're just different looks. there are actually several different species and hybrids of Japanese maples that we sell. Some of them, you know, we wouldn't even necessarily call Japanese maples. So the first grouping would be the full moon maples, the Acer Japonicums and Shiraswanums, if you want to try and say that. Some of my favorites, the Fernleaf, Rising Sun, Grape Leaf, Golden Full Moon, and Autumn Moon. These are trees with a much bigger, broader leaf than what a lot of the other typical Japanese maples have. They're absolutely known for their incredible fall displays. I know all Japanese maples are known for fall color, and that's certainly a major defining characteristic of the plant. But the full moon type maples we're talking are, you know, green 1 minute, and then the next they look like somebody set them on fire. I mean, they're the autumn moons, just, you know, this array of orange and maroons and purples and golds. The fern leaf will go from, you know, just normal bright vivid green to complete dark wine red overnight. I'll show you some of these later, but those are some of the most fantastic. The golden full moon, I always tell people, is one of the most rare, and maybe not rare, but maybe one of the most unique plants that we sell in the garden center. And it's just absolutely an incredible plant for a shady area. It's, you know, golden full moon, it's gold, and it really brightens it up. The center section are all of your typical Japanese maples that a lot of people are familiar with. You see a lot of the blood goods. Another one, similar blood goods, Emperor one that I don't have listed there. Fireglows, similar to the blood good. It's that red palmate Japanese maple leaf, like what I've got pictured on the slide here. You know, Fireglow is just a really nice, more compact size. Mikawa Yatsugusa is one of my favorites. I've got one here on display with me, but we'll talk about all those later. Then you get into the other column that I mentioned earlier. Those are the weeping lace leaf, you know, that really nice thread leaf texture. And those are great ones. I've separated one on there called Ryerson, or the technical name when that first came to this country was Ryusei. Ryerson is a true weeper. So I always think of the other ones as a little bit more of kind of a spreading mounded habit. Ryerson is kind of a new one to the trade. It's been around for a little while, but it's really just caught on in the past 5-10 years. But that's a very, very impressive plant. So the last column are the hybrid maples. So those are Japanese Korean maple hybrids. And those are some of the most groundbreaking hybrids in any plant species, in my opinion, for ornamental purposes. These plants are showing durability and winter hardiness and growth vigor unlike anything we have seen in quite a while. Ice Dragon is the one of the lace leaf varieties of the hybrid maples. Northwind and Final Fire are uprights, and they have a green leaf in the spring and summer, and their fall display rivals even the full moon maple category. So Northwind is one that we have been able to successfully procure and bring into the garden center for our customers. And we have planted several of them in some botanical gardens locally. And we've now seen them planted and performing for a handful of years. And I am just constantly astonished by the display they put on the fall, the growth and the vigor and the structure of these plants. They're absolutely fantastic. So general forms I just mentioned, typically we kind of break them out into your upright, your more rounded forms, and then your spreading, and then what I would consider your true weepers. So your uprights are going to be like your blood goods. So this is your very stereotypical front yard or patio Japanese maple. You know, Japanese maples are great trees because they have a sympodial branching habit where they really are going to go out and up in kind of an umbrella shape, an umbrelliferous form. So this is a great tree where you're saying, hey, I don't need a big tree, but I do need something that's going to be a vertical feature that's going to cast a little bit of shade in an area, perhaps, you know, an outdoor living space. I really want some good color in that area. And then I also want some winter interest. I want something that's got an impressive structure in the winter, so this area is not, not totally devoid of interest when all of the leaves fall off. Japanese maple is a great choice for that. So blood goods, are one of the larger growing of the upright Japanese maples that we sell. They have an incredible spring and summer color. Obviously, they're called blood good because they have that kind of blood red color. What I really like about them in the fall, I always tell people the green Japanese maples have an incredible contrasting fall display to their spring and summer color. The red-leafed Japanese maples, to me, as they start to go into fall color, yes, the color is a brighter red, but it glows. To me, it looks like somebody's just uplighting the tree. I mean, they're absolutely fantastic. One of the major features, though, like I mentioned previously, is certainly the structure of these trees. Bloodgood is kind of the mature ornamental tree in your yard where you're going to get a very bonsai-esque form out of it. So you're going to get to enjoy that tree as a four-season tree. I've put up here in the corner the sun preferences is what I'm going to call those of these trees. And you'll notice I'll say sun, full sun, part sun, and full shade are the little emblems that we've got up there. That's a very notable characteristic of Japanese maples. Their form is certainly going to change based on light environment, but they're going to tolerate and appreciate and thrive in just about any sun exposure you could offer them. So Fireglow, I mentioned briefly earlier, Fireglow is very comparable to Bloodgood. It's just in a more compact form. So for somebody who says, hey, I'd really like that red-leafed upright Japanese maple, I really want something, but I've got a scenario where there's, let's say, an overhang up above or power lines, or I just don't want it to get that big. It's going to be on a garden border, but I really want to show off whatever the big trees are that's behind that. Fireglow is a great choice for that. It's going to stay more in that kind of 10 to 12 foot mature size. Very nice, upright, still that impressive structure shape. Fall color on Fireglow is very notable. It's a little bit brighter than some of the other red leaves, and that's why they call it Fireglow. Twombly's Red Sentinel. So this has been a very popular tree over the past few years, and rightfully so. So when you see these in the garden center, they have a very columnar habit to them, which is characteristic of that tree, especially with a little bit of pruning. You can see the one mature picture here, which is a picture we borrowed from Isley Nursery, which is an absolutely fantastic wholesale grower that we buy from and do business with. Isley's picture there is a fairly old tree. They're botanical gardens there. They really don't do any pruning. They plant things, they allow them to grow to see what they're going to do. And that's also in Boring, Oregon. So growth habits for plants can be a little bit different on the East Coast than they are on the West Coast. So typically I'll see Twombly's stay a little bit narrower than that in habit, but I do typically describe the mature form of the plant as, kind of football shaped if you flipped it upright. So, you were holding it for a kicker to kick a field goal. That's typically a pretty accurate description of the shape. So again, it is a little bit more columnar. It is a little bit narrower of a habit. It's still an upright. It's still a great color contrast in the landscape. And for somebody who says, hey, I've got a corner location, perhaps next to the garage, let's say it's a townhouse environment similar to what I have, and I'd like to get a Japanese maple. I'd like to get some sort of red foliage color in there. I need the vertical, but I don't have the width. Twombly's is a great option. The other thing to consider is, a little bit of pruning goes a long way, and we're not talking about shearing this thing twice a year. You might be pruning the structure of the plant maybe once every 3 years, once every 5 years, just something to maintain a little bit of a narrower habit. If you do that, consistently once every few years, you can really affect the overall mature dimensions of that plant down the line. The other thing that's really notable that I like about Twombly's is they do have a smaller leaf, and they tend to have a little bit of a denser growth habit than some of the others. And that it's hard to convey that on a screen. But if you came out and walked our tree section and you saw the Twombly's next to the Bloodgoods, it's a very different texture in appearance, and it's absolutely fabulous. Sengukaku coral bark. This is one of the most popular for winter interests. This is a fabulous, fabulous choice for somebody who's saying, hey, I've got a spot. There's a lot of evergreen, and I'd like something to, kind of provide a soft texture on this garden border. A lot of people will use these as specimen trees out in the yard, standalone, and I think that's great. But where I really like to see Sengukakus used is that garden border. There's a lot of other greens. Japanese maples, greenleaf Japanese maples, it's not just another green. It's a very bright, vivid, almost neon chartreusey green that you get in the landscape. And then because of that color and the texture in the foliage as it produces growth, it gives you a softer texture, a softer appearance in the landscape. So they really do stand out in a garden border type environment. And then you can imagine if you had an evergreen garden border, I'm just going to say, let's say it's surrounded with, camellias, and maybe you've got some like Japanese plum yews or something in front, and then all of a sudden you've got all of the leaves fall off of this tree. And here's your winter appearance is this really stark red bark. I mean, it is absolutely fantastic winter interest. There are not too many things that are going to give you stem color like that in the winter. You put some red twig dogwoods on the other opposing garden border or something, and that'd be a really nice way to play that. The other thing that's nice about the coral bark is you can see a hint of it in that bottom picture there. It's got fantastic fall color. And again, I can't say enough for what the green-leafed Japanese maples do in the fall. I mean, they completely flip on you, where they're green in the spring and summer. All of a sudden you're getting oranges and yellows and reds and just this really impressive array of colors on some of them. And coral bark is definitely one of those that's known for its fall color. It is kind of one of those medium growers. I'm going to say 15 to 20 feet in maturity. Really nice structure, great umbrella shaped canopy. So again, it's one of those ones you could easily put near a patio where you'd be, enjoying an outdoor living space beneath it. And this would be the tree that would overshadow that space. So Seryu is one of my favorites. Seryu is one of the very few, and it actually is the only one with this full-bodied lace leaf that's an upright. There's a few others that are going to have a lace leaf that are an upright grower. But Seryu has that very, very typical dissectum leaf, but it is a green and it is an upright grower, which is just absolutely priceless in the landscape. You want to talk about texture, this is the way to get it. I'm a big fan of landscaping for contrasting textures, and I think textures really provide a feeling that is a little bit subconscious, but it makes a huge difference. For instance, around the entrance of a home, I really like to use soft textures. I think it's very warm and inviting. So this is a great way to achieve that out of a Japanese maple that's not a lace leaf. Seryu, again, you see the lace leaf there. It's got a good umbrella-shaped habit. And then you see that little square with the fall color there. It is going to go anywhere from a really, really bright kind of like reddish orange to a dark, really deep crimson red. There's a little bit of a variety in the fall color from plant to plant, but they are notorious for having that polar opposite fall color from what their spring and summer looks like. And here's the straight species. So this, when we say straight species, that refers to what we would consider to be a seedling grown plant. So Acer Palmatum is Japanese maple. So this is, if I took a seed off of, again, just a straight green Japanese maple and I planted that seedling, often what you're going to get, you'll get a little bit of variety, but it is a very reliable plant for structure, for fall color, performance in terms of vigor, durability, and then new growth. They are typically very fast growers. So that's a very common misconception about Japanese maples. I'll clear that up in just a minute here. But the straight species, the seedling green, to me is one of the most impressive ornamental trees you could put in the ground that really is an overlooked plant. And to give you an example of that, wait, not there yet. All right, I'll get to that in just a minute. So again, just reiterating the green Japanese maples, and you can see it here. This is a really good idea of what the fall color on them is going to look like. And again, because it's a seedling, you don't necessarily know 100% what the fall color is going to shake out to be, but it is typically somewhere between a, almost fire orange with a little bit of yellow to a really, really deep red. And we do have a great source for seedling grown Japanese maples, and that particular source does an incredible job at focusing on structure. So paper bark, I threw in here. Paper bark is technically not a Japanese maple, okay? So we tend to find that this is one of our most impressive ornamental shade providing trees that can be overlooked. And so with that being said, we tend to lump it in with the Japanese maples, although it technically isn't one. Paper bark maple has all of the similar characteristics to a Japanese maple: growth habit, size, durability, vigor, except you can see this papery exfoliating cinnamon colored bark. So if you're looking for a really, really nice structural presence in the landscape, something that's going to be a complete 4-season tree, this is absolutely a great choice. If you notice the leaf here, and this is how you can really tell it's not technically grouped with the Japanese maples. This has a trifoliate leaf that conveniently looks awfully similar to poison ivy or poison oak, but it is absolutely one of the most impressive ornamental trees that we carry. When you see these in the landscape, they're absolute showstoppers, and you can see the fall color on these. They go 100% red through and through. You would never know it was a green tree in the spring and summer when you see one in fall. So this is, you can see the one I've labeled as the Acer Palmatum seedling. This is my father's house. I thought this would be a great testimonial here. I could show you all. So the green upright that's in front, and this was taken, I'm going to say, about 2 years ago. It's slightly bigger than that right now, probably just barely up to the apex of the roof here. And we've limbed it up just a little bit more, raised that canopy, opened it up so that you can now see through to the front porch a little bit. This is actually, when I say seedling, I'm not kidding. This is actually a tree that I grew from a seed. I'm going to guess it's probably been in the ground for about 8 to 10 years. It really hasn't been there that long. And I do prune it occasionally, probably once every 3 or 5 years. I'll go over there and prune it for structure. But this tree is an absolutely fabulous performer. Like I said, I sprouted a handful of seeds and then selected the one that I felt was going to be appropriate for that space. The red lace leaf, on the other hand, is a crimson queen. So this will be a weeper, what we would consider a weeper anyway. I typically like to think of those as your spreading Japanese maples, mounded types. But the crimson queen, that's a pretty good idea of what a mature size is going to look like. So I really like to use that plant as an example, and I take pictures of my father's property pretty regularly so that I can use that tree as an example. There's a lot of misconception about the colors of these plants, and when you see them in the garden center, especially after a warm summer, they'll lose a lot of their color. They will certainly fade out, but I still think that's a pretty impressive display. That's a great red color, and I don't think you need to get too specific with the actual cultivar or variety of lace leaf in order to get that fabulous color. Crimson Queen's one of the older varieties. Tamukiyama is another one. Very comparable in color, very comparable in shape and performance. Red Dragon is one that's known for holding its red color better, but like I said, I don't think this is a poor display in color at all.
Michael, about how old is that Crimson Queen?
That was planted in 1984.
Okay. So it's mature, definitely.
It is very mature. And please notice the mulch bed that's underneath the tree. I can't say enough, you know, I've got to, being the arborist that I am, I got to put a plug in for proper mulching. This mulch is not touching the trunk of the tree on either one of these trees. It is perfectly flat, level with the surrounding grade, but it is absolutely the width of the drip zone of the canopy of this tree, dedicating an adequate amount of space to the root zone of that tree and eliminating turf competition. I cannot stress the importance of proper mulching for trees. If there is nothing else that you do for your landscape, mulching appropriately and properly is so much.
Okay, we have a couple of care questions. Well, one location question and one about pruning. Do you want to take those or hold those until later?
Let's hold those until later.
All right, sounds good. I'll relay ones related to the trees we're talking about for now.
Awesome. Thank you, Sal. So as I just showed you, this is Crimson Queen. So if you want to, we'll step back just a notch. Check this color here. Now, this is a tree that's been established again now in the ground, you know, pushing 40 years. I can't believe I'm saying that, but again, incredible color here. This one to me looks like it's been in the ground a few years, probably not quite as long, but this is a great idea of what a shape of one of these trees is going to look like in a few years in the ground. Again, this person has probably really trimmed this to give you kind of more of that mushroom top, which I do on that other one. I'll prune it up a little bit so you can see underneath it from time to time. Actually, yeah, this one probably had not been pruned up in maybe 2-3 years and allowed to cascade down. So you'll see the you know, real darker red foliage color. That's a pretty good idea of what their foliage is going to look like, as I showed previously. And then you see they do brighten up and really give you that nice scarlet red in the fall as well. You know, there are some notes on here. It says, you know, one of the notes in here says prefers protection from the hot afternoon sun. I really think that that's open to interpretation. I believe all of the Japanese maples, with the exception of about 2 of them, and I'll certainly hit on one of them, all the Japanese maples will tolerate full sun quite well and will thrive in that setting, as long as they have what they need in order to do so. So if you've got a great mulch bed, you know, my father's, just going back one more time, I don't want to beat this issue too much, but this tree does not get a second of shade. This tree, until, you know, from time the sun rises over the houses in front until about 4 p.m., this gets full beating hot sun. So that mulch bed and adequate water through the summertime when it needs it, that's what allows a tree like that to thrive and really perform in that, you know, I'm going to say abusive environment. It's not abusive, but when you get into a difficult environment, as long as trees have everything they need to do what they're supposed to, then they can tolerate a little bit of a you know, on the envelope type environment. Tamukiyama. So Tamukiyama, I always, you know, you can notice a little bit of a different leaf structure. Tamukiyama, Crimson Queen are very similar trees. I always notice that Tamukiyama to me looks like it's got a little bit more purple tones in it, but it's an absolutely fabulous plant. And I typically tell people, when you're looking for a lace leaf Japanese maple, the best thing that you can do is kind of throw the cultivar name out the window. Unless there is a very specific characteristic that you've identified about that plant, which there are certainly a few for some of the specific plants. If there's a very specific characteristic you've identified that you're after, then that's one thing. But otherwise, if you're saying, hey, I'd like a red lace leaf Japanese maple, I've done my research, you know, but there's nothing defining, I'm really just looking for the right plant for the right space, that's when I kind of throw those cultivar names out the window and I look for what plant I like structurally. And then whether it be Crimson Queen or Tamukiyama or Red Dragon, those I kind of am very flexible with that based on structural preferences. Red Dragon, as I said, Red Dragon tends to stay a little bit smaller. It truly does. I don't think it's going to, you know, 40 years down the line, get that 8-foot spread that my father's Crimson Queen has. They're going to stay a little bit smaller, similar again in form, shape, everything, performance. They are known and were selected for maintaining their red color a little bit better through the heat of the summer. So again, I think that that's really splitting hairs. if you go back to that slide of my father's front yard, I think that tree is absolutely stunning. You know, that picture was taken in the summer. I don't think that that's lost any red color. If you had a row of red dragons next to a row of crimson queens, I think you could probably better identify that maintaining of that red color. And Varieties. So Varieties, and there are certainly a handful of other green lace leaves that are great plants as well. Again, I think the green Japanese maples in general, I think a lot of times when somebody comes looking for a Japanese maple, they are looking for a red-leafed plant. And sometimes when you're set on what you're looking for, when you come into the garden center and you know, okay, I'm going for a Japanese maple, and you're only thinking about them existing as a red-leafed foliage, sometimes even if the more appropriate plant for that space, color contrast wise, is a green leafed plant, I think it can be very hard to separate from that notion that you had coming in that you were looking for a red leaf plant. But you know, you have to consider a lot of homes in this area have a brick front facade, or similarly, if you are, my mother's a great example. She has a number of Japanese maples on her property, but when you look in her backyard, they have a location that they were looking for a Japanese maple for, and they wanted a weeping lace leaf. But the area is mostly viewed from above, as they've got a second-story deck that you'll walk out onto, and the patio was a reddish brownish brick. So she had come in to select a lace leaf Japanese maple, and we're looking at all the reds. And I said, well, where's this going? She said, it's going in the backyard. I said, where in the backyard? And she told me, I said, well, Mom, you're hardly ever out sitting next to that plant at ground level. You're going to be viewing that probably from the deck mostly, and it's going to blend right into that brick paver patio that you have. Why don't we put in a green there? So that's what we ended up doing. She's thrilled. It's got a great color contrast. It really pops off the patio when you're looking at it from above. And then you get this amazing contrasting fall display out of it, like you do with the green Japanese maples. I mean, again, I can't say enough for it. You've got this just wealth of colors: orange, yellow, or red. And again, the reds brighten up. They certainly show you a good color, but it's not the extreme contrast and seasonal change that the greens will show you. So those we've gone through the uprights, we've gone through the weepers, or what I'm going to call mounded. So here's the full moon type. So these are your Acer Japonicums, your Acer Shiraswanums. These would be your more spreading habit plants. These are going to be a much more toned down size and maturity than a lot of your more full scale uprights. Typically, you're going to see in the neighborhood, I'm going to say of 10 to 12 to 15 feet would be a very mature plant. They do spread typically as much as they will grow tall. So you'll have a very nice rounded shape to them overall. Really good structural interest in these plants. And again, the foliage is typically 2 to 3 times the size, if not larger, than your typical Acer Palmatum type Japanese maples. So this is the Acer Japonica Mechanifolium, which is full moon, Fernleaf, full moon. This is an incredible texture. You can almost see it's almost got that dissected lace leaf appearance to it. But again, this leaf is, I'm going to say, 3/4 the size of your hand if you put your hand out. And that's obviously that's a relative term based on the size of your hand. But if I put my hand out and on one of these plants in the ground that's mature, that leaf is going to be 3/4 the size of my hand. It's a really, really dramatic presence in the landscape. One of the things I really like to emphasize when I do landscaping is foliage textures, and to get some large leafed plants in there can really make a big difference in any landscape. It just gives you a great feel. So this is one of those plants. Again, it's a really nice kind of lime green spring summer color, and then it starts to go into fall display. So the orange here is certainly what you'll get with some of them, but the lower image with the red color is what I tend to see more, and often they'll get even darker than that, sometimes to that blood good summer color red. I've had people come in and look at the Fernleaf Japanese maples when they're in fall color, and I've had to remind them, hey, just making sure you're aware this is going to produce a green leaf next spring, because they won't have a speck of green on them and they'll still hold their leaves through fall for a solid 3 weeks with color. This is a great example of that. This is actually my neighbor up the street from me. And in the one image, you can see there's middle of the summer, maybe a little bit late summer. Tree is in green foliage. Sugar maple to the right is still green with a little bit of what looks like maybe some heat and drought stress on it. I can see some slightly yellowing leaves in the canopy. So that to me would probably indicate that image was taken in August. And here's full bore fall. You've got a little bit of foliage, dried on the ground from the sugar, but the sugar maple's in full color. And here's your fern leaf in that deep crimson, blood red fall color that they're notorious for. So judging by the size of that plant, I'm going to guess that plant is probably about 30 years old. So that should give you a very realistic size expectation and maturity. And again, we try to give you a, what I'm going to say for trees is about a 7 to 10 year size expectation on our information here on our tags, because a lot of times that's the size that's relevant for people. It's not every scenario where somebody's in a home for more than 7 to 10 years. Often you may be there 10 years and then move on to the next. So we want you to have a realistic expectation of what size is. But in the scenario that you're saying, hey, I would like to plant something here responsibly and make sure that it's never going to, get way bigger than what I'm reading. It says this is a great expectation for this plant, long term down the line when you may not be in that home anymore. And this is a perfect size Japanese maple for a townhouse front yard.
Mike, we have a question about how close you can plant Japanese maples to like a sidewalk or a driveway of the house. So if they're asking, are the roots invasive depending on the variety, as long as the crown spread is taken into account for the tree, how close to house or driveway is possible? That's what it looks like. This is pretty close. I would say so. And again, I'm being the tree person that I am. I monitor the unique trees in my neighborhood. I've been in my home now 13 years, 14 this coming spring. I pay very close attention and I monitor and catalog some of the trees throughout the neighborhood that are interesting to me. There's not a crack in that driveway that I would attribute to the root system of that tree. You might have a little bit of freeze thaw damage and one like hairline fracture running down the driveway, but it's concrete. So Japanese maples, and this is going to be true for most trees of that size. Japanese maples are a very durable wood and an incredibly strong tree, but they are simply not a big enough tree that in, I'm going to say a 20-year time span are going to be able to apply enough pressure in your average scenario, right? They're not going to be able to apply enough pressure to a sidewalk or a driveway to cause damage. Again, if this tree's 30 years old, it certainly would have done it by now if that was an oak tree, right? And I can attest to that because, 3 houses down, there is that oak tree and you can see the sidewalks cracked there, or they've had to redo the sidewalk. And my neighborhood is excellent with canopy coverage. So there are London plane trees that were planted original with the neighborhood that are very mature, and they also have done some damage to driveways and sidewalks. And that size tree, what we would consider an overstory canopy tree, we would expect that out of them. Japanese maples, crepe myrtles, those types of smaller ornamental trees, it is a very unique scenario with an extremely limited soil space and root zone that they might cause damage. And I still think that would be in a very significant amount of time. It wouldn't happen quickly. So golden full moon. Now I messed this slide up because I did think that I deleted this sun emblem up here. Golden full moon, this was the one I was going to point out. This is the only one I'm going to highlight during this feature here
that truly does not like full sun. And that is very important. And we want to set you up for success with everything you do with us. So that's an important note to make. I'm glad that I noticed that I accidentally included that full sun emblem on there. Golden full moon needs some protection from the hot afternoon sun. That doesn't mean it can't tolerate any direct sun at all. That means this plant is thrilled to have early morning direct sun, even through noon, 1 o'clock. But as soon as you get into the hot afternoon sun, or again, it could be the opposite. You may say, hey, I don't have any early morning sun for it, but I've got from 2 o'clock on. Is that okay? That's fine. It cannot tolerate full sun from sunup till sundown. Every other Japanese maple that we're talking about today can. Golden full moon needs some protection from direct sun at some points of the day. But again, it can have direct sun. It just can't have it all day long. But golden full moon is one of the most unique plants we carry. I would absolutely consider it to be a rare plant. Incredible spring and summer color. You can see the image there next to the fall color of the foliage. It's a very full lobed leaf, very, very impressive texture, and incredible like neon chartreusey gold foliage color. This is a plant that I really do like to use in shade gardens as an accent. This is a great standalone specimen. You can't say enough about how well this performs in a shade garden environment and what it brings to the table. It almost is like turning on a lamp in a shadier environment. It really brightens the space, and it goes with just about anything. And then again, you know, it's a green Japanese maple, so there's the image of the fall color turning. The Shiraswanums are absolutely known for fall display. Golden full moon and autumn moon are just complete showstoppers in the fall. You will not have a single person that could walk by one without stopping in awe of them. They're just magnificent. The one thing I will mention, these are typically a little bit slower growing. So the palmatums, I mentioned I was going to hit on that and I kind of skipped right through it. Japanese maples, as a whole, I hear this thought that they're slow growing plants, and they're not at all. The Shiraswanums and the Japonicums tend to be a little bit slower growing than the straight palmatums, but Japanese maples will actually put out an incredible amount of vegetative new growth. If you know, there's two types of growth on plants. There's what we call primary growth, and then there's secondary growth. Primary growth refers to vegetative growth, measurable elongation of shoots. When a plant starts to put out new growth in the spring, and you can see those branches growing and getting longer, that's what we call primary growth. Secondary growth is girth. Trunk development, branches getting thicker. If you were to measure the new growth on a blood good Japanese maple, you could easily see between 1 foot and 2 feet. I would not categorize that as a slow growing plant, but they're a small plant in maturity. This is a small ornamental tree we're talking about. So when somebody says it's a slow grower, my comment is it's actually quite a fast grower. But they have a smaller mature size, so sometimes it can be a little bit deceiving. The golden full moons, the Shiraswanums and Japonicums are typically a little bit slower growing. Oh, good, there you go. So I did include they really don't like full sun. Good, I didn't totally fail myself there. Mikawa Yatsugusa. So we're heading back to the palmatum types. Mikawa is absolutely one of my favorite Japanese maples. I have 2 at my house. I've had several throughout the years that I've either, you know, gifted to people or anyway, I cannot say enough for this Japanese maple. It's very unique. The picture of the foliage here stacked, you can see what a dense growth habit it has. What a really cool texture it is in the landscape. Just next to that, you see the dark green, you know, picture of the full plant. That is a young plant that's in the ground. It's very rounded. It's not doing justice for its full structure. This is a plant that you would, if you said, hey, I really want something that is going to look like a bonsai that I don't have to do anything to, this is that plant. it will do it naturally on its own. It will stay dense. You don't have to do a thing to it to make it look like it's been a bonsai and you know, manicured for years and years and years. It is just absolutely fantastic structurally. And it's got a great small compact size. So this is one where I would say, hey, you know, if I've got a space where I might consider putting in a weeping lace leaf Japanese maple, but I really don't want to put in one of those. I like to do something different, a little bit more unique and unusual. This is a great choice for that because it's not going to get much bigger than what those will. Of course, then make a liar out of me because the bottom picture with the fall color, the plant looks enormous. Again, that may be a picture that was snatched offline from Oregon. That's really more to give you an idea of what the fall color is. In this area, a realistic 7 to 10 year size, I think you could expect 6 to 8 feet out of this plant, you know, tall and wide. It's just an absolutely fabulous plant, fabulous structure, and a really, really good size for that type of scenario where you can't have something that gets too big. Rhode Island Red. So Rhode Island Red is one of my favorites. There are some really impressive specimens around. People have been planting them now. We've, you know, really seen the interest in this particular cultivar increase over the past 5-7 years, I would say. This is a great mounded plant. They have a very rounded habit. It is, you know, an impressive red spring and summer color. And again, it gets even brighter in the fall, just as the reds do. But this is one where I would say, you know, you could use this in unique scenarios. So this is actually one of the plants at one of my customers' properties that we've used as a hedge, and we've planted a hedge of these around one of those green electric like cable boxes, and we've hidden that electric box with these, and they really do just kind of present as a hedge. So it doesn't need to be a standalone specimen. You know, Japanese maples can certainly be used for mass planting type scenarios, especially when utilized correctly, and this is a great choice for that. Shishigashira, so this is the lion's head Japanese maple. This is very comparable in form and I would say broad spectrum appearance to the Mikawa Yatsugusa. Shishigashira is a very, very dense growth habit. It has this really, really gnarly, dark, crinkled, kind of curls over leaf, almost like it's got a little bit of like summer heat stress, but it doesn't. That's just what it does. It's this dark jade green leaf, really crinkly. You can see a little bit of them in the fall color image. And then it does, the leaves curl over almost as if they were like I'm going to say like, you know, eagle's talons grabbing a branch. That's the way they kind of crinkle over. This is a fabulous plant. It's another one where I would say if you were looking for something that was going to be a specimen, hey, I want something that looks like a bonsai. I've got a very, you know, specimen location in the garden where I need something like that, but I don't know that I've got the time to put into it. This is a great choice for that. Fall color is incredible. You're going to get a variety of fall colors. Typically that reddish orange with a little bit of yellow, and sometimes as it progresses gets a little darker red. Typically that's very common for this plant. Back to Rhode Island Red. So again, I already touched on this when we went to the rounded form plants, but again, I can't say enough for Rhode Island. It's just absolutely a fabulous plant. So now we get into the hybrids. So these are the ones I briefly touched on earlier, the Japanese Korean maple hybrids. So this was an experiment from the head grower at one of the best nurseries in the country. And he started hybridizing these maples, and he came up with 2 different series, but a handful of them we've selected as, you know, our favorites. And we've really started to bring into the garden center and really tried to make sure people are aware of them because of their durability, their vigor, their performance. So, you know, one of the most impressive things about these is their tolerance for extreme heat and extreme cold. So as you can see, they have proven to be hardy to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. One of the things I briefly mentioned I think with the Fernleaf, or I may not have because I think I got distracted when we were talking about the roots possibly doing damage to sidewalk or driveways. A lot of the green Japanese maples, the Japonicums especially, and these hybrid Korean Japanese maple hybrids, one of the very interesting defining characteristics that I think we may not necessarily get the message out on clear enough, but is a really pleasant surprise to people, is so Japanese maples, all plants flower with the exception of a handful, right? So ferns, gymnosperms, fern-like species, mosses, spike mosses, those don't flower. Other than that, all plants flower. That doesn't mean all plants flower like a cherry blossom or a dogwood and in your face, really ornamental bloom that's going to stop you in tracks. But all plants flower because it's a mechanism of reproduction. So with Japanese maples, these hybrids, as well as the Japonicums and the Shiroswanums, their flower is a very small, discrete red flower that descends from the foliage and the branch. So as a whole, overall, you get this very impressive kind of slight red flowering display on this really beautiful green backdrop. But then once those flowers fade, again, after a flower has been fertilized and is done, well, then a seed develops. And everybody's familiar with the samaras that we kind of endearingly termed helicopters that maples produce. Well, the samaras on the Japonicums and the Shiroswanums are very impressively colored. And on the Korean Japanese maple hybrids, they tend to be so bright red that they almost appear to be pink. And it is a major, major ornamental characteristic of these trees. They're absolutely gorgeous. Then again, I cannot say enough about the fall color of these plants. It's just this polar opposite color of what they display in spring and summer. And I don't think you could ever expect the performance that they actually provide you. So Northwind is the upright that I'm going to say we've really had success getting in the nursery and that I have planted the most. This fall color that you're seeing here in the new growth, this probably, to be candid with you, is probably not fall color. This is probably, as it looks, and you can see new growth emerging, that's just a hint of fall color that it's producing. Usually plants that are in good sun exposure, when they produce new growth, will show you what their fall color is going to look like in the new growth. So that to me looks like the new growth color, because the fall color on this plant is even 3 shades brighter than that. The picture here that I have of the plant in fall color does not do it justice at all. It is so fiery, and it looks like somebody turned a neon sign on. It's so bright. They're extremely vigorous, very fast growing. You know, they will be one of the larger size Japanese maples. So you are probably talking like in a 15 to 20 foot, maybe 25 in maturity. And again, I've seen these now planted, and actually I've discussed with some other folks in other areas of the country. I have one of our reps who visits other territories was mentioning to me that he's got some images of these, and he had shared them with me on his phone at the time. In Kansas City, which is much colder than what we have typically in the wintertime, he has an alley of these planted in a commercial setting in a parking lot median at elevation where it's a little bit higher up on a hill. And he said there is no protection from the winter winds, and they have just flourished in this space. So similarly, I've seen a few of them planted. We had brought some in very early for some special customers and a botanical garden locally, and we planted them, and they are planted in a higher spot in the garden, and they have just done absolutely wonderful. I've been so impressed with it. So now we get into the weepers. Real quickly, before we get into the weepers, I just want to say, I had mentioned Ice Dragon. I had mentioned there's another one called Cascadia. Those are the green lace leaves of the hybrids. There's another one that I mentioned called Final Fire. I didn't really want to hit on those too hard individually. I mentioned them. They are ones that we are hoping to get more of in the future. This is the one right now that we have been able to get the most of. As these plants catch on more and more and gain interest, hopefully production will increase and we'll see more of them. We were able to procure a few Final Fire for the spring. We weren't able to get any for this fall. We do have some Ice Dragon. we have another one called Wabi Sabi that's very cool. And I don't know if the plant's that cool or if I just really like to say the name, but no, it is a really fantastic plant. It's very neat. But hopefully these new Korean Japanese maple hybrids will continue to gain interest in the public eye so that they do increase production. So we will see more of them because they are absolutely invaluable in the ornamental landscape. So again, I know we spoke about the lace leaves earlier, the Crimson Queens, Tamooks. I consider those more of a mounded habit, more spreading. This is what I would consider a weeper. So this is Ryerson. I absolutely love this plant. I think this really presents in a similar way to what you see people using weeping cherries or weeping redbuds in their landscapes. You know, this is a great tree if you want something that is going to provide you a real pop, whether it be in a mass planting and you want to plant 3 of these on a garden border, or whether it be as a standalone specimen in a garden. You can see the picture of Tim Guy here and this Ryerson that looks like it's dwarfing him. Really, this plant is not very big. Tim's about 3 feet tall. I'm just kidding. We always joke with Tim about his height. But that's a great example of what this plant can bring to the garden in the wintertime. Look at that dramatic structure. And not just the weeping habit of the branches, but look at the kink in the trunk on this. And that is not something that someone's trained. If anything, that's something that these folks were trying to train out of, because, you know, people do tend to want a little bit of more of a prim, proper look for their plants sometimes. So you can see they've got a stake on this plant trying to get it to go a little bit more upright. But they really do get this beautiful, gnarly growth habit to them. And it's such a dramatic feature in the landscape. And then you see the texture of the image that's in green foliage. This is a plant that I would say, you know, if I had a garden border, and let's say I had an evergreen screen between my neighbors and my property, this is absolutely a plant. You could say, hey, let's put 3 of these to break up that evergreen screen. You could raise the canopies up on them, and then you could underplant that. You know, I'm going to say you could do like a hosta heuchera garden underneath those. You're getting that opposite growth habit, which in itself, you know, you've got upright evergreens behind. Let's just say you've got a you know, green giant arborvitae or deodar cedar, you know, row behind these. Well, that's upright growth habit, needle leaf. And then you put, let's say, 3 of these in front. Well, now not only do you have a different broadleaf foliage texture, but you've got a weeping growth habit off it. That's a very stark contrast and a really impressive way to do a garden border. And then to raise the canopy on it a little bit so you can underplant it. And now you're talking. And then again, I'm constantly reminded about the display of fall color with the green Japanese maples. I cannot say enough for it. It is just absolutely incredible. They are one of the most impressive fall display plants that you could possibly put in a garden. So I want to thank Joel Cook, who's pictured here. This is, again, one of our growers. Those are like 30-year crop lace leaves. We get the opportunity to go out and visit this nursery. A lot of the trees and shrubs that we have in the garden center here have come from this nursery, and we go visit them and make sure that we're hand selecting the best stuff to bring home for you all. I want to thank Joel Cook because he has provided me with a lot of the imagery that I used for this slideshow. So thanks, Joel, for your help and materials. And thank you all for being here. And I'm more than happy to entertain any questions or comments. And Sally's going to relay all that stuff to me that I'm not quite able to see on my screen. But I also just want to make sure everybody knows I am absolutely more than happy to entertain any questions you may think of later. Anything that doesn't come up right now, I'm very easily reached here at the garden center pretty much any day. So don't ever hesitate to reach out and give me a call.
Thanks, Michael. All right, yeah, so I'll go ahead and start for questions. I know for anybody who needs to go, we'll be recording this as well, so you're welcome to follow up with me, and I'll send it to you when it's ready. And as always, if we don't get to your questions, as Michael said, he's happy to talk to you guys. If you don't have his direct email address or our store phone number, the fastest way to get in touch with us is to just hit reply on that confirmation email. That goes to me. I will forward it directly to Michael. So he will get any of those. All right, Michael. So our first question, I think you more or less covered, but the question is for Japanese maples, if they can handle southern and western exposure. It sounds like the answer is yes, except for the one.
Yeah, absolutely. There, and again, I think it goes back to the plant healthcare. This is a topic that we really try to drive home. You know, it's the, have I created a healthy environment for my landscape, for my plants, for my trees? As long as you have done everything in your power to provide a good, healthy environment for those plants where they're able to, you know, thrive, then yes, they can tolerate that environment. Japanese maples, it's not tolerating, it's appreciating. This is the environment that they want to perform in. That golden full moon, there's another one called Golden Dream. I didn't include it because we, you know, really aren't able to secure a good number of those. So I didn't include it in this webinar, but the Golden Full Moon and Golden Dream are really the only two that come to mind off the top of my head that that truly can't tolerate full sun. And then actually this right here, this is Katsura, convenient that it's right here. Katsura is the full sun appreciating version of Golden Dream, not the Golden Full Moon that I pictured here, but so again, that, you know, there you have one that really wants shade, and someone somewhere down the line selected a branch off of that for whatever reason. It was grown in sun and it seemed to be tolerating the environment better, and they started a new cutting called Katsura, and this plant performs wonderfully in the sun. So yeah, with the exception of those two, that's an ideal environment for Japanese maples.
Okay, thanks. All right, next question. So I know a lot of them you said don't require all that much pruning, but when they do need pruning, is there a particular time of year that should be done, or is there a standard, like you said every 3 to 5?
So yeah, no, that's a great question, and I want to be clear. The arborist side of me is cringing at the word need. So no plant ever needed to be pruned, right? So I had a mentor once say, no tree ever produced a leaf it didn't want and need. So we have to remember, when we're pruning something, there needs to be an objective. There's a mission here. What are we pruning for? What do we wish to accomplish? So once we have that, let's say we're pruning for structure. Japanese maples are one that, again, if they're going to put out a foot of growth, let's say elongation of shoot, and I want to prune that so I've got a little bit more density in the canopy, I may come in and very simply reduce the branch and come to that first set of true leaves that's come out. Again, they produce opposite leaves. I may reduce the length of that branch to there. That's something that, to be totally honest with you, it can be done at any time. Ideally, you would want to perform that type of pruning if it's an ornamental pruning. You'd want to perform that as the tree is getting ready to leaf out. You know, when you're starting to see some bud swell. Anytime you're pruning a branch, you're releasing hormones throughout the tree that are then triggering that plant and these dormant latent buds to now fire new growth. So the last thing you want to do is invigorate a plant and encourage new growth at a time of year where that might not be sustainable, i.e. Right now, right? So I wouldn't be going in and just trimming back my Japanese maples right now, because if they all of a sudden fire off a whole bunch of new growth and you're, you know, you've got a foot of new growth, well, that new growth is all full of water and it hasn't hardened off and developed wood yet. And if we get an early freeze, then there's potential for freeze damage. And with Japanese maples especially, you can get branch dieback. It's not just that new soft, watery new growth that's going to freeze back. Sometimes you'll get dieback into the woody stems if you've got freeze damage on them. So a great time is spring. Again, I try to think about if I'm that plant, okay, and I've already produced all of my new leaves for the spring, and then somebody comes in and whacks at me, and I've got to go and do it all again, I'm going to be a little frustrated. Well, couldn't you have done this? Couldn't you have let me know you were going to do this before I put out all this new growth and spent all this energy? So for me, I really look for bud swell. And on Japanese maples, it's very easy to identify. These, you can't see buds yet because the leaf petiole is hiding where the buds will develop. But as soon as those buds start to develop in winter, you can see them. They're dark. They're prominently displayed along the branches, opposite of each other on the branches. And then as we start to see some warmth in spring, I'm going to say, early to mid-March, you'll see those buds starting to swell, get a little bit bigger, get a little bit of color to them. Usually it's a little red, depending on the variety. As soon as you start to see bud swell, that's the time when I go in there and start doing that.
All right, thank you, Michael. Okay, next question is about the mulch. Okay, so on your dad's tree, you showed the mulch line goes all the way out to like the drip line on the plant.
Correct.
Is that for aesthetic purposes, or is it to increase the protection of the plant? I know you mentioned it was to prevent competition for water.
Absolutely, nutrients, water, etc. So mulching, aesthetics, and what one finds aesthetically pleasing is in the eye of the beholder. So it could be. I find that attractive. I love to see a big wide mulch bed on trees. I think it looks majestic. I think it looks appropriate to me, but that's because I have a preconceived notion that that's what that tree needs and that's what it's supposed to be. But I think that that's negotiable, and I think it depends on the size of the yard, and it depends on what your preferences are, what your aesthetic preferences are. So it is absolutely a matter of function, and it is beneficial for the tree. So you would hear, typically arborists would tell you you want to mulch to the drip zone of the canopy, at least, right? So what that does is it eliminates competition from turf, which, if you've ever seen turf, you can see sod here, we sell in rolls. The root system on sod is very thick, very dense. It's very hard for moisture to penetrate that when we don't get a heavy rain. If we get a 1/4 inch of rain or 1/2 inch of rain, most of that moisture is going to the turf. Similarly, grass is a monocot. It's a very aggressive plant. So you're talking about a plant that is now not only taking water, but it's also taking nutrients. So, and that's good. We want our lawns to be healthy, and we want to make sure that everything is playing nice together. Often you'll see when you've got maturing trees, you will see grass right around that immediate feeder root zone area. You'll see grass thinning and you'll see patchiness. So that's a mix of shade. We kind of call the light that comes through tree canopy green light. It's aphotosynthetic. It's a mix of that. It's a mix of tree root competition. So in my opinion, it's, hey, let's just mulch out to the area where that grass is already known to be successful anyway. The tree's going to appreciate that dedicated space where it knows it's getting more moisture and nutrition. And then the other factor there is, yes, mulch is great for moisture retention. If you've ever seen, a heavy rain hit bare dirt, when it hits that compact dirt, it splashes up and a lot of it runs off. Well, mulch is very porous. It's a very absorbing material. So it's great for moisture retention. The other thing that it's great for is organic matter in the soil. So when you mulch, instead of pulling that old mulch away, if you want to spread it a little bit, that's fine. But again, once you get a good mulch layer down, you're only going in and you're dressing that every year or twice a year or however often you do it. But you're just top dressing that a little bit to just kind of dress it up. But leave that mulch, because as that mulch breaks down and releases the organic matter in the soil profile, your soil profile, if you had a good, rich, topsoil about yay deep, well, year after year of mulching, now all of a sudden you've got a good, rich soil profile 7-8 inches down. And that's where your tree roots are, is 8, 10, 12 inches deep in the soil. So the more organic matter that breaks down and releases into that soil profile over time, the healthier your landscape is going to, the healthier your soils are going to be, the more your plants are going to have what they need to be able to do what they do, photosynthesize, produce food for themselves. So mulching appropriately is absolutely a part of a healthy landscape environment.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Next question. Do you have a recommendation for a Japanese maple that would remain under 10 feet for a spot that gets intense afternoon sun?
Yeah. Yes, 100%. And again, if it depends on what you want. Do you want red leaf? Do you want a green leaf? Any of those lace leaves that I mentioned, the Tamooks, the Crimson Queens, those would be fantastic. If you were looking for more of an upright with a red leaf, I'd say Fireglow, Sherwood Flame. Those would be great choices. If you wanted a green leaf and you wanted an upright and you were open to doing one of like the Japonicums or the Shiroswanum types, I would say the Autumn Moon, the Fernleaf Full Moon. There's one that I listed on the initial slide where I was talking about the different categories of Japanese maples. I didn't have any images of it later on, but the grape leaf, Vitifolium, and Rising Sun, those are amazing, amazing plants that are going to be right in that size category. They're going to love that sun, soak it up, and then they're going to give you impressive fall display. All
right. Okay, next question. The Rhode Island Red, how large does that tree ultimately grow, say in like 10, 15 years? What's the mature size of that plant?
Sure. And before that, so Rhode Island would be another one in that category.
Okay, another good. There's plenty of options. That's
yeah,
for sure.
and of course I left out Shishigashira and then Mikawa. I brought one of these up here somewhere. I thought I brought a bigger one to display because this one's a little bit small and hard to see structure on. But Mikawa and Shishigashira would be two others that would fit into that sub 10-foot range. Rhode Island, gosh, I think you're talking 6 foot in like a 10-15 year size. The one at Isley Nursery in their display garden there, again, keeping in mind that's Oregon, they've got a completely different environment, completely different growing season than we do. That thing's probably 10 to 12 foot rounded, and I bet you it's been in the ground for 20, 30 years. Okay. So I think on the East Coast in a reasonable amount of time, again, a 7-10 year size, I think we would tell you probably 4 to 6 foot. I think 10 to 15 year size, if you're talking a little bit longer term, I think you could probably bet on 6 foot. I don't know that you'd see it get any bigger than that here. I think Rhode Island's going to stay awfully small for us.
Okay.
Yeah. All
righty. Okay. We have a question about what was the name of the cultivar that you showed in the last picture on your slide presentation?
Ryerson, I believe, right? The weeper, the true weeper. Yeah.
Yes, I think so. They just want to know the last picture you showed. I think that was it.
Ryerson, and you can find a lot of information about it under Ryusei, which is RYU space SEI. Ryerson is kind of the trade name you'll see in garden centers, RYUSEN. And again, I right now I'm plotting a number of different locations that I'm going to sneak those in. So
you just responded back. It was the one I think it was the one Joel was standing next to.
Oh, those are Tamooks, the big one. Those are Tamukiyamas that are, so those are, I kind of do that as a fun slide. Nobody's going to get anything like that. That's a, like I said, those are 30-year crop Japanese maples. They are grafted onto the stem of a straight seedling green. That green is probably, I'm going to say about 10 foot high. And then they graft a Tamukiyama scion wood onto the top of those, and then they grow it as a big weeping habit. Those are actually sitting up in cedar boxes that are probably about 4 to 5 feet off the ground.
Oh, wow.
And then they trail all the way back down to the ground. So those are very, very unique. That's not something that you're typically going to find in the garden center. I think.
All right. Okay. Well, they look really cool.
yeah, they're amazing. Absolutely. Which is why I use that as kind of a fun image there. It's just, and that's one of the fun things about Japanese maples. I mean, you see, like I said, there's a Japanese maple that fits into every scenario and every landscape, and there's one that any person anywhere, no matter what your taste is, you are going to fall in love with. And that's a great example of them. And it's just completely different than anything else you're ever going to see anywhere.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Next question, which varieties will work? Okay, this person has North Light under tall oaks and maples. So it sounds like a lot of shade.
Okay, so, and I'm grateful that that person brought that up. Any of them. Dealer's choice.
Okay.
Anybody, any Japanese maple you want to put there. There is a book called The Book of Lists. I'm not doing any promo. I don't know the author. I couldn't even tell you who published it or anything like that. In the Book of Lists, the Book of Lists is basically a little handbook that tells you about plants for different environments. Japanese maple is listed as one of the plants, one of the trees that thrives in shade. So that is an invaluable reference for this plant. Japanese maples will have a different growth habit in full sun than they will in full shade, but they will absolutely do either, and they'll do either very happily. So you will see, you know, more structure. You'll see, you know, a lot more stem and branches, but you will have that plant happy, performing, thriving. It will just be thinner, won't be nearly as dense as what it would be in the full sun.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, this is our last question. So we'll go ahead and ask this one. Thank you guys, everybody, for joining us. Last question is there any particular soil additive that Japanese maples like? I have very red, dense soil. Yeah.
And I would say welcome to the same issue that we all have. You know, no is the answer. So there's a lot of products out there. Japanese maples are a very popular plant, you know. There are a lot of different products out there that are marketed specifically for Japanese maples. So the reality is no different than what I was just suggesting with the mulch. You know, your clay soil, you know, whether it be just normal Virginia red clay, or if you're in a new development where it's really you know, devoid of nutrients, builder grade clay and rock, organic matter in your soil is the end objective here. You want to enrich in your soils. You know, we can't feed plants. Plants are autotrophic. They feed themselves through photosynthesis. It's our job to feed our soils so that our plants have everything they need to be able to feed themselves. So any organic matter is absolutely the answer there. There's not one product necessarily that is going to be the magic pill for the Japanese maple success. Our planting mix, our Merrifield planting mix, is an absolutely fabulous structural soil conditioner. You know, the composition of that product, it's very easy to rep our brand products when we have something like that. That is a fantastic composition for a soil conditioner for trees. I absolutely love that soil conditioner for woody plants. And I use that when I plant Japanese maples, whether I'm planting them in the ground or if I'm planting them in a container. I usually will, even in a container, if I'm using potting soil, I will mix in some of our Merrifield planting mix. But the end answer is that's just a great way to get organic matter in that soil. The more organic matter in your soil, the better pore space you have, the better air exchange, oxygen exchange in the soil, the better water flow through the soil, the better nutrient capacity. So it all really comes back to taking care of your soils and making sure that you're constantly adding organic matter to the soil. That's really the right answer there.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Michael. That was our last question. Quick reminders for all of you. We will be sending out an email tomorrow that will have a coupon. It will have a link to the recording from the class. If you have any questions, just hit reply on that confirmation email. If you think of anything, that'll come straight to me. I'll send it to Michael. Michael, thank you for joining us. I know this was great. I'm looking forward to your next class on native plants.
Thanks, Sally.
Well. Is there anything you want to wrap up with before we end the class for the day?
No, just really, I can't emphasize enough. If anybody has, you know, any other questions or they need help, you know, if they're interested in Japanese maples and you know, need just a little reminder of what we discussed today, I'm very easy to get a hold of here at Fair Oaks. And, you know, you call the store and ask for Michael anytime, and that's enough to get me. And I'm more than happy to help any way I can.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael. Everybody have a great afternoon, and we will see you hopefully later this week for our virtual plant clinic that we'll have some information about that going out this afternoon. So everybody have a great day. Bye, Michael.
Bye. Thanks, Sally.